Mara sat in the corner of the space station's observation deck, her small frame hunched over, shoulders drawn in tightly as if trying to disappear. The bright lights of Cerulean Station reflected off the polished floors, bouncing across the walls and the metal panels of the corridor, but she barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on her hands, which she pressed against her face. Deep scars ran across her pale blue skin, jagged lines that told a story of pain and fear, of fire and falling metal. She had survived the accident on the planet's surface, but surviving had left her feeling exposed, vulnerable, and painfully different from everyone else around her. From the moment she entered the station, Mara had noticed the stares. Students would whisper and point as she passed, their voices low but sharp, cutting her with every syllable. "Look at her," someone would say. "Who let someone like that near us?" Another would snicker, making faces behind her back. Mara wanted to vanish, wanted to sink into the metal floor or vanish into the airlock and float away into the void where no one could see her. The corridors, usually bustling with noise, felt unbearably loud as every laugh and whisper seemed amplified in her ears. She avoided the social areas completely, slipping through hidden pathways, ducking into maintenance corridors and hiding among the pipes and vents. Even the cafeteria, filled with the smells of alien foods and synthetic protein packs, was off-limits. Mara moved quietly, always aware of the gaze that might fall upon her. Every glance felt like a reminder of her scars, a mirror of how different she was from everyone else. She had been careful to blend in to avoid attention, but the whispers followed her like shadows. She felt trapped in a cage of eyes that refused to look away. From across the observation deck, a young human boy noticed her. Leo Bennett, quiet and thoughtful, was leaning against a railing watching the stars outside the window. His dark hair fell into his eyes as he adjusted his stance, but his gaze kept returning to the small figure hunched in the corner. Something about her drew him in, not out of curiosity like others might have stared at something unusual, but out of concern, out of empathy. He had seen students laugh at her, pointing and whispering, and unlike the others he did not join in. Instead he felt a strange pull, a need to understand. Leo observed her for a moment longer, noticing the way she flinched at every sound, the way her shoulders tensed at the smallest movement. She was withdrawn, fragile, and yet there was a quiet strength in the way she held herself, despite everything. Her eyes peeked out from between her fingers occasionally, scanning the empty spaces as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. Leo felt a mix of curiosity and admiration. Here was someone who had endured something terrible and yet survived. He could see beyond the scars, beyond the blue skin marked by fire and metal, and he wanted her to know that someone noticed more than just the wounds. He shifted his weight slightly, moving closer but still keeping a safe distance, careful not to startle her. His hands rested lightly on the railing and he spoke softly to himself, almost a whisper that Mara could not hear. "I wonder what happened to her, why she hides like that." He didn't need to announce his interest to the others, didn't need to draw attention. Quiet observation was enough. In his silence, he hoped Mara might feel some presence that wasn't meant to harm her, some reassurance that she was not entirely alone in the bustling station. Mara, sensing movement from the corner of her eye, lifted her head slightly. She glimpsed him, a human boy watching her without judgment or ridicule. Unlike the others, he didn't laugh or point. There was no cruel whisper accompanying his gaze. She blinked, surprised, unsure what to make of him. For the first time since arriving at the station, someone looked at her and seemed to see past the scars, past the difference, past the pain. Mara felt a small spark of hope flicker in her chest, fragile and tentative. The other students continued their whispers, but Mara's attention shifted slightly. She studied the human boy, noticing the calm expression on his face, the way his eyes reflected genuine interest rather than mockery. He seemed steady, unhurried, and entirely unaffected by the chaos around them. Mara's shoulders relaxed fractionally, a small sign that she was beginning to trust the presence of someone who might see her for more than her scars. Leo continued to watch, sensing that Mara was aware of him now. He offered a small, reassuring nod, careful to keep it subtle. It was not a dramatic gesture, not meant to draw attention or provoke ridicule from the others. Instead, it was a quiet acknowledgement. He saw her. He recognized her courage, her pain, and her strength, and in that small nod, Mara understood that she was not entirely invisible. For the first time in many days, Mara allowed herself to sit a little straighter, letting her hands fall gently to her lap. The shadows of fear and shame still lingered, but the presence of the human boy offered a fragile sense of connection. She did not yet trust him fully, nor did she speak, But simply seeing that someone could look beyond her scars gave her a sliver of comfort she had not felt before. Leo's quiet empathy did more than simply notice her existence. It challenged the invisible barrier that had grown around Mara, a wall built from years of fear and rejection. Here was a human, a simple boy, showing that someone could care without reason or judgment, that courage and kindness could exist even in a place filled with cruelty and indifference. Mara stayed there for a long moment, watching him watch her, until the noises of the space station faded into the background. The laughter, the whispers, the cruel stares, they all existed on the periphery. What mattered in that instant was the connection forming between them, unspoken yet undeniable. Mara did not know what the future held, but she sensed that perhaps, finally, she had found someone who might see her as more than just the scars she bore. And for the first time in weeks, Mara allowed herself a small, tentative hope. Somewhere in the chaos of the bustling space station, amidst whispers and cruel stares, there was a human boy who saw her, really saw her, and that was the beginning of everything. Ethan watched Lyra from a distance for a few days, noticing the way she flinched at every whisper or glance. He saw how she avoided the busy corridors, moving silently between rooms as if trying not to be noticed. He knew the other students mocked her, but he also knew that cruelty often came from fear or ignorance, not from seeing the true person beneath. Ethan wanted to reach out, but he did not rush. He understood that trust had to be earned, especially with someone who had been hurt and ignored for so long. The first gesture was small. Ethan waited until the cafeteria was less crowded and carefully placed a packet of protein bars on the table where he knew Lyra would sit. It was simple, but it was something. He did not expect her to notice him or even accept it. When she did look up and see the snack, her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and suspicion. She glanced around to see if someone was playing a joke on her, but no one else seemed to be paying attention. Ethan, standing at the edge of the room, gave a small, reassuring nod before walking away quietly. The next day, Ethan held a door open for her as she carried a few supplies back from the lab. "After you," he said softly, smiling in a way that was calm and non-threatening. Lyra hesitated for a moment, uncertain if he was mocking her or setting her up for more humiliation. But there was nothing cruel in his eyes, nothing to indicate a joke. Slowly, she stepped through the doorway and for the first time, someone had acknowledged her presence without fear or derision. Ethan began to speak to her occasionally in the quiet moments when the corridors were empty. He asked simple questions about her favorite music or what stories she liked from her home planet. He shared stories from Earth, funny mishaps, clumsy mistakes, and experiences he had made while growing up. He did not talk about the other students or the teasing. He did not lecture or scold. He simply shared himself, treating her as a person rather than a target or a project. At first, Lyra responded with short, cautious answers, her voice soft and almost hesitant. She was wary, expecting mockery or ridicule at every turn. But Ethan's calm patience began to break down the wall she had built around herself. He did not pressure her to speak or smile. He simply showed that he could be trusted. Over the course of several days she began to open up a little. Small smiles appeared when he told a funny story about slipping on earth mud or dropping a tray of food. She laughed quietly once, startled by the sound of her own voice, realizing she had not felt that light in a long time. Ethan's gestures became routine, though still subtle. He would save a seat for her in the classroom or hand her an extra tool when she was working in the lab. Lyra began to notice that these acts were consistent. No tricks, no sudden withdrawal of kindness, just small, steady actions. Slowly, the suspicion that had dominated her thoughts started to fade. She realized that Ethan's intentions were genuine. He wanted to be her friend, not her critic. One day, while walking along the observation deck, Ethan pointed out the stars in the distance. "See that bright one?" he said, smiling. "On Earth we call it Sirius. People have looked at it for thousands of years, and they all feel a little wonder when they see it. I like to think it reminds us that no matter where we are, we can find something beautiful." Lyra tilted her head and looked, following his finger. The star shone steadily against the blackness of space. For a moment she felt connected, not just to Ethan but to something larger, something beyond the whispers and mocking glances of the station. As days passed, the bond between them strengthened quietly. Ethan never demanded anything from her. He did not ask her to forget the teasing, nor did he expect her to suddenly become confident overnight. He simply continued to show care and patience. Lyra began to anticipate his presence, finding comfort in his calm demeanor. She started to smile more often, and occasionally she would speak to him before he spoke to her, asking questions about his home, his stories, or the strange foods humans sometimes enjoyed. Ethan in turn noticed the change. Her eyes were brighter, her steps a little less hesitant, her posture less defensive. He felt a quiet pride in knowing that his simple acts of kindness were making a difference. He had not done anything heroic in the traditional sense. He had not fought anyone or proven himself in battle. But through small, steady gestures, he had shown Lyra that she was seen and valued, that her scars did not make her unworthy of friendship or compassion. Other students began to notice the subtle changes as well. Mara, another student, whispered to a friend that Lyra seemed happier, calmer, less afraid. No one yet understood what had caused it, but Ethan did not care. He was focused only on continuing to show that trust and empathy could bridge the gap that fear and cruelty had created. By the end of the week, Lyra's laughter became more frequent, soft and genuine. She walked through the station with her head held a little higher, still aware of the stares but less affected by them. She knew that there was at least one person who saw her as more than her scars. One person who valued her courage and her presence. And that knowledge gave her strength to face the station each day with a new, quiet confidence. Ethan's small acts of kindness had achieved something remarkable. They had reminded Lyra that human empathy could be as powerful as any weapon or rule, that courage could be quiet and gentle, and that trust could be built slowly, patiently, one small gesture at a time. For the first time in months, Lyra felt that she belonged somewhere, even in a place that had once seemed full of cruelty and judgment. And though she did not say it aloud, Lyra knew that she had begun to trust, to hope, and to believe that kindness could exist in the most unexpected places, even from a human boy in a galaxy far from Earth. The cafeteria was filled with the noise of clattering trays, chatter, and laughter, but at one table, the laughter turned sharp. A group of students surrounded Mara as she sat quietly, her lunch untouched. Their voices grew louder, crueler, the words cutting deeper than any wound she had suffered in her accident. One boy sneered, "What's the matter, Scarface? Lose a fight with a reactor." Another girl joined in, covering her mouth as she giggled, pretending to whisper but making sure Mara heard every word. Mara's hands shook. She stared down at her tray, her reflection blurred by tears that she refused to let fall. Her chest tightened, her breathing shallow. She tried to stand to walk away, but one of the boys blocked her path. "Where are you going?" he said mockingly. "We're just trying to get to know you." His tone was false, dripping with sarcasm. Every sound in the room seemed to fade except for the laughter. It was as if the world had shrunk to this small, cruel circle of faces. Her throat ached, and she wished, more than anything, that she could disappear into the floor, vanish from their gaze forever. Then a new voice broke through the noise, calm, firm, and steady. "That's enough." The laughter faltered. Leo Bennett stood at the edge of the group, his expression cold and serious. He wasn't the biggest or the strongest student, but there was something in his tone that made people pause. His tray clattered as he set it down on the nearby table. "You should stop," he said again, stepping closer. "Now." The boy blocking Mara's way smirked. "What, you're going to defend her, human? Didn't know you liked freaks." The others laughed again, but their laughter felt weaker this time, uncertain. Leo didn't flinch. He stepped between them and Mara, his body forming a barrier. "She's not a freak," Leo said quietly, his voice low but full of force. "She's just someone who got hurt. Something you clearly wouldn't understand." The words hung heavy in the air. Some of the students shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. No one had ever challenged them before, certainly not for her. The leader of the group frowned, trying to regain his confidence. "You think you're brave?" he asked, stepping closer. "You think she wants your pity?" Leo shook his head. "It's not pity," he said. "It's respect. Something you might learn one day." The silence that followed felt like the pause before a storm. The other students looked around, unsure whether to keep laughing or to walk away. Mara stood frozen behind Leo, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear. She didn't know what to do. No one had ever defended her before. Finally, the tension broke. One of the bullies muttered something under his breath and turned away. The others hesitated but followed, their mockery fading as they left the cafeteria, pretending it hadn't mattered to them. The leader shot Leo a glare before walking off too, clearly unwilling to start a fight in front of everyone. When they were gone, the room felt quieter than it had moments ago. A few onlookers turned away, pretending not to have seen what happened. No one came to help, but no one dared to laugh anymore either. Leo turned around slowly. Mara still stood there, trembling slightly, her eyes wide and full of confusion. She looked like someone who didn't believe what had just happened. Leo gave a small, soft smile. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded weakly but didn't speak. Her throat felt tight and she couldn't find her voice. She wanted to thank him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she lowered her gaze, ashamed of the tears forming in her eyes. "It's fine," Leo said quickly, his voice calm and reassuring. "You don't have to say anything." He picked up her tray and motioned toward a nearby table. "Let's sit. You shouldn't eat alone." Mara hesitated. Part of her wanted to run, to hide again. But something about Leo's calm tone made her pause. Slowly, she followed him to a quiet corner, sitting down across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Leo began eating, pretending everything was normal, giving her space to breathe. After a few minutes, Mara whispered, "Why did you do that?" He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Because no one else would," he said simply. "And it wasn't right." Mara frowned, confused. "You don't even know me." "I don't have to," Leo said, smiling faintly. "I just know you didn't deserve that." Her chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from something else, something unfamiliar. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever stood between her and cruelty, not since the accident that left her scarred. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was warm, quiet, safe. She glanced at him again, studying his face. There was no pity in his eyes, only sincerity. For the first time she felt like someone truly saw her. Not her scars, not her past, but her. Later that day, when Mara walked through the station corridors, she noticed fewer stares. The students who had mocked her avoided her gaze. The story of what happened in the cafeteria had already begun to spread. People whispered, but not in the same cruel tone as before. They whispered about the human boy who had stood up to them, who had dared to face a crowd for someone else's dignity. That night, Mara lay in her small dorm room, staring at the ceiling. She replayed the moment over and over, the way Leo had stood in front of her, unflinching, fearless. She touched her face lightly, tracing the edges of her scars. For the first time they didn't feel as heavy. Somehow, Leo's simple act had done something extraordinary. He had shown her that there was strength in kindness, that courage didn't always come from power or status. Sometimes it came from standing up, even when standing up meant standing alone. And though she hadn't thanked him yet, Mara promised herself that she would. Because Leo hadn't just stopped the laughter. He had reminded her that she still had worth. That maybe, even in a galaxy full of cruelty and fear, there were still hearts brave enough to care. The day had been tense and heavy, the kind of day Mara thought she would never survive. The cafeteria still smelled of burnt protein packs and metal, and the murmurs of the remaining students echoed faintly in the corners. Mara sat across from Leo at the quiet observation deck, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the floor. Her heart still raced from the confrontation earlier, and the memory of the laughter made her chest tighten. She wanted to shrink back, hide, disappear entirely. Leo noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided his eyes. He had been gentle so far, giving her space, speaking in soft, calm tones. But today something told him that Mara needed more than words. She needed to feel that someone truly saw her, not just her scars, not just her injuries, not just the way the others whispered about her. She needed a reminder that she had value, and that courage and kindness existed even when cruelty surrounded her. He leaned closer, careful not to frighten her, and let his hand brush lightly over the table. "Mara," he said softly, "you're stronger than you think. And you're more than what they say about you." Mara's eyes flicked up, meeting his. They were calm, steady, and sincere. No hint of teasing, no mockery, no false concern, just human honesty and warmth. She felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Could someone truly see her as she was and not as the scars others focused on? Leo paused for a moment, gauging her reaction. Then, without hesitation, he pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. The gesture was brief, quiet, almost ceremonial in its simplicity. Yet in that moment it spoke volumes. It said, "I see you. I value you. Your scars do not define you. Your pain does not make you lesser. You are remarkable simply for being you." The effect on Mara was immediate and profound. She froze, blinking rapidly, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Her fear, the constant weight of shame she carried, the anxiety of being judged, all of it seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a fragile, blooming relief. For the first time in months, maybe even years, someone had acted solely for her sake, without expectation, without judgment, without cruelty. Around them, the other students went silent. They had been watching from a distance, some hesitant to intervene, some too stunned to speak. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Mockery and laughter were replaced with shock, embarrassment, and an awkward awareness that their behavior had been cruel and unkind. No one had ever seen Leo act this way, bold, sincere, compassionate. The power of his gesture made them aware of their own smallness, their pettiness. Mara's lips parted slightly, a faint breath escaping her. She touched her cheek where his lips had briefly pressed, feeling warmth spread through her, both physical and emotional. A small, tentative smile formed, fragile but genuine. It was a smile she hadn't allowed herself in a long time, one that came not from relief alone but from the recognition that someone cared. Leo smiled back, quietly, sensing her reaction without needing her to speak. He understood that trust and courage were not always shown through grand actions or loud declarations. Sometimes the simplest gestures, the softest words, the quietest touch, carried the greatest weight. His kiss had been small, almost invisible to the crowd, but it had spoken louder than any shouting or anger ever could. Mara's fear slowly transformed into disbelief, then relief, and finally into a quiet sense of validation. She realized that her scars, the things she had always thought made her unworthy, had not defined her to everyone. Someone had seen her strength, her courage, and her beauty. Someone had chosen to acknowledge it, not out of pity but out of respect and care. Around them, the cafeteria remained mostly silent. The few remaining students shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Mara's gaze. Some whispered to each other, voices low, as though processing what had just occurred. The lesson had been clear. Cruelty and mockery could be met with courage, empathy, and human kindness. Leo's actions had rewritten the rules of engagement, showing that strength could be gentle and brave could be compassionate. Mara exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave her body in a way she hadn't thought possible. The weight of constant judgment, the fear of mockery, the pressure to hide, all of it seemed lighter somehow. She looked at Leo again, eyes still wide but softened. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice small but steady. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Leo replied gently, leaning back slightly. "I just wanted you to know that someone sees you for who you really are." For the first time Mara believed it. Not fully, perhaps, but enough to let herself feel hope. Enough to lift her chin, to meet his eyes, and to allow herself a moment of acceptance and trust. In that moment, Leo's simple act of kindness and courage had shattered months of fear and alienation. He had shown Mara that humans could act with heart, even in an alien world where she felt so alone. The weight of mockery and cruelty that had seemed insurmountable was replaced with a fragile sense of belonging. Mara felt seen, valued, and for the first time powerful in her own quiet way. The cafeteria may have been filled with students, whispers, and judgment, but Mara no longer felt small. She had learned that courage and empathy were not just words, they were actions, simple and profound, that could change someone's world forever. And in the eyes of one human boy, she found a light that made her scars matter less than her heart. Word of Leo's courage spread quickly across Cerulean Station. At first, it was quiet whispers in the hallways, students sharing the story in hushed tones between classes. "Did you see what he did for Mara?" one student would ask. "I can't believe someone actually stood up for her." Slowly, the story traveled through the corridors, echoing across classrooms, the cafeteria, and the observation decks. Even students who had once mocked Mara began to reconsider their actions, realizing that cruelty was not the only way to show power or strength. Mara noticed the change before anyone directly addressed it. Students stopped staring, whispers became quieter, and fewer people laughed when she passed. Though she still carried the scars of her accident, those jagged marks no longer felt like chains. They were part of her story, but they no longer defined how others saw her, or how she saw herself. She walked with a small sense of pride, head held a little higher than before, navigating the station with growing confidence. Over time, Mara began to join school activities. She attended classes more openly, participated in discussions, and even volunteered for group projects. Her knowledge and intelligence were slowly recognized, and she realized that people were curious about her for more than just her scars. Leo remained at her side, always encouraging, never pushing too hard, letting her grow at her own pace. His presence became a quiet reassurance, a reminder that someone could see her as more than her injuries. Other students began to follow his example, not all at once and not perfectly, but the tone of the station gradually shifted. Kindness began to ripple outward from Mara and Leo. Where there had once been judgment and mockery, there were now small acts of support. Someone helping Mara with a heavy tray, another student saving a seat for her in the classroom. The human example of courage and empathy had quietly influenced the entire community. Years passed and Mara grew stronger, braver, and more self-assured. Her scars remained, etched across her skin like a map of the challenges she had survived, but they were no longer a source of shame. They were a testament to her resilience, a reminder that she had endured and overcome pain. She smiled freely now, laughter returning to her life, shared with those who had earned her trust. Leo remained a close friend through the years. They shared conversations about life, the stars, and the strange worlds they visited through the station's exploration programs. He had been there at her lowest points, never judging, always acting with empathy and courage. His support had helped her see that friendship could bridge differences in species, culture, and experience. The story of Leo's bravery and Mara's growth became quietly admired throughout the station. Teachers would occasionally recount it as an example of human empathy, explaining to new students that courage did not always come from weapons or authority. Sometimes, it came from small acts of care, simple gestures of support, and the willingness to stand up for someone else. Mara's journey reminded everyone that even in a world full of differences, understanding and compassion could change lives. Mara herself often reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the first time Leo had stood up for her, the cafeteria filled with students laughing, and the fear that had gripped her. She remembered the moment he had pressed his lips gently to her cheek, the quiet but powerful declaration that she mattered. That act of bravery had shifted everything. It had given her hope, courage, and the belief that she could belong. Though her life was not without challenges, Mara faced each day with confidence, strength, and an openness to connect with others. She learned that appearances could be deceiving, that strength could come in quiet, subtle forms, and that trust could grow slowly but deeply. She had discovered that friendship, kindness, and courage could cross any boundary, even the invisible ones set by prejudice or fear. Mara also realized that she had become stronger not only because of Leo's support but also because of the choices she made afterward. She chose to trust herself, to accept her scars as part of her story, and to allow others the chance to see her true self. The scars had once been a source of pain, but now they were reminders of survival, resilience, and the power of human connection. As she looked out at the stars from the station's observation deck, Mara often thought about the vastness of space, the countless worlds beyond, and the unexpected ways life could bring people together. She knew that one simple, brave gesture from a human boy had set her on a path she could never have imagined. It had shown her that courage could be gentle, that empathy could be strong, and that even in a universe full of differences, one act of kindness could create lasting change. Mara's story and Leo's courage became a quiet legend in the station, inspiring students to look beyond appearances and to act with empathy in their daily lives. People remembered that it was not weapons, rules, or power that changed hearts, but small human gestures of understanding and care. Mara herself carried that lesson forward, helping others when they were in need, offering friendship to those who were lonely or afraid, just as Leo had done for her. Her life continued, full of hope, friendship, and connection. The scars remained, but they no longer defined her. They were a part of her story, yes, but not the whole story. What mattered most was that she had learned the value of courage, the depth of empathy, and the power of a simple act of kindness. And she knew that the galaxy, though vast and often indifferent, could be a place where one human's heart could change the life of another forever.